to MBA and Beyond. Today, I am here with two very smart and beautiful ladies with me. I'd like to invite Samriddhi and Rupert to maybe put on your cameras on and unmute your mics. But just before they introduce themselves, a little bit about them. Samriddhi is a doctor going to a top business school soon. Rupert is coming from, she is the vice president of an organization. Of course, more to come as an introduction from her. And she's joining Georgetown. I'm Paridhi, co-founder of MBA and Beyond. And just to help you understand what we do at MBA and Beyond, we facilitate a matchmaking between mentors and applicants who are going to top business schools, wanting to go to top business schools with consultants who come from very similar background like yours, do a very regular job like you and I. They are working as VCs, PEs in Silicon Valley. Some of them are co-founders in Silicon Valley. Some of them are management consultants with MBBs, but they're coming together as a part of this initiative to help candidates and increase the average intellect at the top business schools. So these are our consultants, a little bit about them. And MBA and Beyond, as a part of its process, helps you understand what is your purpose of doing an MBA and putting that kind of expensive, like all that kind of money, hard-earned money that you've earned so far, and potentially you're going to be taking some loans. What are you going to be doing with that after you put that into a really good college? So some of you, as I can see, are looking to start off with MBA and Beyond soon. Some of you are just here for a very interesting, informative session, which I promise you, this is going to be a very insightful session with Samriddhi and Rupal. So now I'm going to, of course, hand over the stage to Samriddhi to introduce herself, and later on Rupal thereafter. Over to you, Samriddhi.
Sure. Hi, guys. I hope you're doing great. I am Dr. Samriddhi Sood. I've been accepted into Kellogg and Michigan Ross with scholarships. So I believe my ROI at MBA and Beyond has been beyond amazing. That's one thing I'd like to say moving forward. Apart from that, I would say I was an ex-entrepreneur as well. I worked in health tech, so my profile is not traditional, if any of you can relate. And personally, I would like to say I'm a larger-than-life person who loves to explore everything that is out there. That's all about me.
Thanks, Samriddhi. And before Rupal, you can go. Guys, this is a very close-knit session again, a very I know your questions are coming through to us in the background. While I understand you guys want to drop in your questions in the chat, I would love to invite all of you on camera. It just makes more sense to see more faces. It makes the session more interactive. And as we proceed and as a question comes to you, you're welcome to raise your hands, and we are welcoming you to unmute yourself and ask your questions as we go. So you guys are the next global business leaders, as we can see how engaged you are. I would really like to see these faces. So it'd be nice to come on camera for all of us. We make it nice and interesting. Over to you, Rupal.
Yeah, thanks, Paridhi.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, whichever time zone you are in. So I'm Rupal. My background is I'm a company secretary and a lawyer. I've been working like around 8 years in the industry, and right now I'm with Arpal Finance. I'm heading the department over there. I have been admitted to Georgetown. This was a journey with MBA and Beyond. Great, amazing. And so rest, I'm open for the questions for all of you, whatever you have. And I think that you all should open your camera so that we have a very interactive session and you can get the maximum out of this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rupal, for reminding everyone. We're waiting, guys. Shall we say that we are not going to take the procession ahead if we don't see your faces? At least 3, 4, 5, I don't know. Wherever you are, in your bed, in your pajamas, having your coffee, having your beer, having your wine. I'm having my coffee. You don't have to look nice and smart and pretty. Thanks, Saroj. Really wakes eye. Everybody's looking very nice and neat. Why are you guys not turning on the camera? Nice to see your faces, Tanvi, Vishesh, Saroj. All right, we've got a couple of questions that have come through to us. I'm going to ask those questions first. So maybe for the first 15 minutes, we tackle those questions. And then as we progress, if there are more questions coming through to you guys, feel free to raise your hands and we're happy to take them. But before I can take up those questions, there's a question for Samriddhi and Rupal for you to educate the audience here. When did you guys think that you want to go for an MBA and why?
Okay, so I'll go first, if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
had happened was that, so I've done my MBBS from AIIMS Patna. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon all throughout my life, but medicine was not as what I expected. Frankly, healthcare situation is very dire. So I decided to pivot and I ended up working in a health tech company in Bangalore. During this point in time, I founded a company which was valued okay. So I was doing well on paper, but I actually lost money doing that. Despite all the confidence, I realized that I was not cut out for business because I had no skills. So that's when I decided to look into other ventures at how I might grow as an entrepreneur. So I decided that ultimately, let's go to a B school, let's get into management consulting, and maybe have a little more exposure before we drop down a couple of bucks on a venture that's not going to scale. So
Thanks, Samriddhi. I have a follow-up question for that. I remember going through your branding back in the day. Did you also say that you wanted to be a management consultant in your application?
no, I did not say that. I straight up said that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but then my consultants made me realize that it's very risky for some schools. And you have to admit, because they have to ensure that the students actually end up getting a job after MBA, and it impacts their rankings. So, I had to change that a little bit, but
yeah. But in your heart, that's where you're headed after Kellogg. So yeah,
I'm already there. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, your story, Rupal. When did you get the first conception? Like when did you conceive the thought that you want to go for an MBA, and when did you start working towards it?
So for me, I tell you, I have never followed this traditional company secretarial compliance role. I have worked in this as a CF, but in multiple domains. So I work with NSC in enforcement. Then I work with legal compliances. I work with regulatory compliances, foreign compliances, different sectors, different compliances I work with. Then most of my stints was with I used to deal with board of directors in the organization, and these conversations behind the boardrooms are very interesting for me. Getting into a merger, amalgamation, or taking a new business line, closing a business line. I was part of all these conversations, but it always incites me I don't have the requisite, skill set to be a part of that. I just had one kind of compliance requisite, and I wanted to be on that part. And being 8 to 9 years working in that industry, you realize that what is the next step forward. So people don't follow that, but for me, it's the stagnation was coming in. I was thinking the next steps, what to do. Then I was figuring out my ways, what next? Consulting, then which consulting? IB, then what in IB? What I have to do? Then this is how I started my research, and MBA was the short, but after MBA, what? So that is how it started. Then I finally decided to go for it. And then how the journey started.
Okay. Next question before I jump on the questions from the audience. When did you, so right now, most of the people who are sitting here, they're either targeting round one, where the deadlines are September, first week. Some of them are later in August. Some of them are targeting early action or rolling admissions. So when did you both start working on your applications, and when do you suggest that the applicants should start working on their applications, in your opinion, from an applicant perspective?
Yeah, this is actually the very important thing in the application process, the full application process. So ideally what we say early round R1, and obviously if you are not ready there too, but if you are strong-headed, you are decided that you want to go for an MBA and your plans are clear, your goals are clear, and you're still figuring out some part of it, that is fine. But if you have decided for it, you want to go for it, you should start. It's we are in April now. So I think it's a good time to, connect with someone and start preparing, because in April, if you are, then we can target early rounds, or R1 definitely with a good application. With a good application, we can target R1. So for me, I think this is very important. This timeline is very important. If in case we fall, R2 is there, but the major rush goes to R2. To secure the seats, secure the scholarships, R1 is the best time to start with, and this is the best time to start with. And certain things we get to know through our journey also. Like for Samriddhi, her consultant shifted the goal, because for the application, what sometimes you think is not correct. Even my goal changed, I tell you, with when branding I was doing, because a lot of things we get to know through the journey. So for me, I think this is the ideal time to start.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing what was your post MBA goal earlier and what did it become after? After, of course, like when you were submitting your application.
So I was more focused on sustainability and sustainability that. But then she made me understood that it is not connecting with from where you're coming. Your experience of these years should not go in vain. It should connect with something that sustainability is something you can add on, but that cannot be your major goal. So you have to go for, I think, whatever corporate strategy you want to go, consulting you want to go, IB you want to go, and we can add the taste of sustainability is there because it is now everywhere. We have to look it from that perspective. But that she made me realize, and I tell you honestly, it took me like a month to absorb that because I was not ready to take that. Then I understood that whatever she's saying is correct, and we have to roll it like that. That worked for me.
Got it. Samriddhi, as of course, like we are aware, how long did it take for you to nurture your goals? Like what kind of a goal that you should pitch to? Because to be honest, I was just rolling out this poll a couple of days back to understand where are people stuck the most. And I think goals is where most people find it hardest to think like what should be my post MBA goal, where I'm able to bring in all my experience and connect the dots and trickle it down to this one goal that I'm pitching to top business schools. How long did it take you? Because for you, it was a very non-traditional background, trying to bring it from, bring it to a business perspective, what business schools are really looking for. How long did it take you?
So I was actually really flexible with my goals because what had happened was that after I got my GRE score in May 2022,
I
was not very serious about it. It was just a casual attempt, and thankfully I ended up with an okay score. So I was like, great, we're done with it. I don't have to do it. And I did apply to Harvard in round 2. Obviously, I did not get in. So I was more determined than ever. I was ready to work with whatever my consultant said. And the other thing was that I talked to a bunch of Tuck students, and all of them had the same opinion about it. That, it's great that you want to be an entrepreneur, but what are you going to be doing immediately after you leave the business school? And I was okay within a week because obviously I do not know.
Okay, got it. All right. So, guys, as we were talking about this, before we jump on to the next round of questions, I'm just sharing my screen quickly to show you a little journey of any applicant. I'll just pick any applicant right now of ours. Okay. Sorry, my bad. I'm going to reshare my screen. Yeah. Meanwhile, maybe we can tackle one of the questions till I fix this. One of the questions that have come to us, Samriddhi, it is, how can applicants identify individuals who can provide strong recommendation letters? I think the question is more around who to pick and how. Like if there are any strategies for both of you, Rupal and Samriddhi, if you can help candidates understand so that they can start building their rapport already with the people that they want to get their recommendations from.
So I take this one. I actually have a very interesting anecdote for this. The manager I worked with previously, I had asked him to write my recs for Harvard and Rotman and Rice very long ago in 2022 or 2023. And he straight up said that I like your work, but I am going to be very honest about it. And he did not even, I was not even aware what he had written. That was the situation. So I would suggest that have an honest. So the next manager that I moved on to, I was working directly with the VP of product in my company. I had an honest conversation with her that, see, this is my scenario. I have dreams and aspirations. I'm going to be moving out of the organization. And I would really love to discuss about the recommendation letter, which indirectly meant that I want to know what you will be writing. So, and after a while, it was a fit. Now, for my second letter, what happens is it was mostly doctors who did not have a lot of time or experience, and I had to guide them. So now MBA and Beyond also there's a section in the packet, right, for the recommenders that you can send. That was extremely helpful because I gave them pointers and I knew what was going in. So this is how my recommenders.
Thanks, Samriddhi, for that. So, guys, first of all, I understand that maybe we are thinking much ahead in time and this is how you're seeing it, that why should we be talking about recommendations? But some people have been asking that question. It's important because you need to start building a rapport with your recommenders. There is a reason for that. You want them to write points which are supporting your application, not just anything randomly eulogizing you, like he's been a great leader without any example. He's been a great person who takes up new challenges and new initiatives. Really good value that you have. But as long as your application is not being supported by the real examples that you showcased at your workplace, they are not going to hold any meaning or value to admissions committee. So anyways, that was one question. I'm just jumping back to some of the questions that people are dropping me. When should we start if we are still working on our GMAT and GRE? So first, I'd like you to understand what the application journey generally looks like. And then we're going to come down to how are you going to tackle the next 4 months going ahead from here so that you're able to be ready with your application by September. So this is a usual dashboard of any MBA and beyond's applicant. And this is a portal which we call Mirror, where you kind of sit down with yourself and reflect through the journey of an MBA application. And it has multiple sections in it. Some of you might have seen it. Some of you might be seeing it for the first time. So as soon as you come on board, this is something that takes 2 to 3 days. Some people who have a lot of clarity can really fill it out very fast. We want to understand what you want to do with an MBA. Why do you want to put in that kind of money? What has your career trajectory been so far and what do you want to accomplish afterwards? What are your personal aspirations? It does not always have to be professional. So we also want to understand you personally. There are some extra bits where you do, you take a personality test. And of course, you also try to give us 3 references of very important people in your life who you in and out. So this is very important for us to do a 360-degree analysis of, an applicant who's coming on board with MBA and beyond from the perspective of others, not just your own perspective. So we're going to ask you to, of course, share 3 of your references. 2 of them can be, 2 of them we require them to be professional. 1 can be personal or professional. So it's up to you. So 3 people, 2 most likely from professional, and some people are very smart. They actually get these references already. If you've got a good rapport with your recommenders, you can already submit their email addresses with us. And we are happy to collect some info and input from you. It just helps us collect more meat on you to build a greater story. And for you also to understand what your recommenders are thinking about you. So it's just a 2-way street for you to already understand and collect, if you're not able to directly have a conversation with your recommenders. So once this is done, we go back to understanding what you really look like and what you're really aiming to do. And then we map you with the right fit consultant. Now, when you talk about consultants, there are a plethora of consultants that MBA and Beyond is working with right now. And MBA and Beyond's community is ever expanding. For example, Samriddhi and Drupal are joining us as profile experts now. So as soon as you get an admit, you come on board as a profile expert with MBA and Beyond. While, of course, when you graduate and you have amassed a couple of years of experience, you become a consultant with us because you've been helping candidates, with evaluating their profiles and advising them a lot. So you become a consultant. Now, these consultants are mapped based on how you've answered those questions. And this is done by an internal team to understand where is your, best fit, because these are people like you and me. They're doing jobs like you and me. They are, of course, some of them part of the admissions committee, but they are folks like us who've taken the same journey that you want to take today. And this is a very big community and an important community initiative that we've taken and we've been running for past 4 years. And our success rate has significantly improved because of working with people from the industry space matched with the right people who want to go, let's say if your interest is healthcare, we're going to potentially help you find somebody, a consultant who is from the healthcare space, understands the industry, understands the landscape of the job scenario in the geography that you're looking at. And then eventually we're going to map you with the consultant. Now, this is your second step. We still don't advise you to be coming up with your school of choice right now. The school selection will happen after you've done your content gathering. You have to understand that business schools are looking for something very important in your application. It's called values. For anything that you're telling them, they are seeking their 3 to 4 set of values that you bring to the table, which matches with them. So let's say if you're applying to INSEAD, if you do not have international exposure to talk about, they are not going to consider you even if you have a 770 GMAT. Let alone, everything else, contribution to the community, whatever, because that's the foremost important value for them. For Stanford, if you do not have social impact, or Oxford said, if you do not have social impact in your background, you do not have sufficient stories to back, we are not going to advise you to apply to those schools. So we need to understand you from your goals perspective, from your strengths perspective, achievements, weaknesses, failures, international exposure, your extracurriculars, there is a bunch of course, resources that you would refer to. There can be some people that we put you in touch with, some people you will yourself reach out to, do your research, and then we will jump onto identifying which are the best fit school for you. This is going to be good for you and good for us to increase our success rate to 20 years of school. So once you do the school selection, then we jump on to working on your essays, which is step 7. So in order to understand when should you start working with your GMAT or GRE, what I can say, this journey can be taken without your score until school selection. So until step 5, which is all the points that I just shared you, content gathering, your goals, your thinking part, your understanding what your stories are, all of this work, which is filling in your short-term goals, your long-term goals, what is your vision with an MBA, how do you position yourself, as a global business leader in the larger context of the world when you're going to graduate, how the world is going to look like then. So that work needs to be done before you do your school selection, and this can happen without your score. But that does not mean that you should take GMAT GRE lightly. While we understand that the weightage is 15 to 20%, it actually helps you bag scholarships if you're looking at it, along with an admit to really difficult and competitive schools like M7s and LBS and INSEAD. If you're really targeting, you need to aim for a 740 plus. And right now at this stage, if you have 4 months at hand, you can't think that I want to write my GMAT first and then I need to work on my application, where let's say if you just have 1 month at hand, you want to do, 5 applications. On an average in MBA and Beyond's understanding, it takes 21 days to pull off one application, because we are not those pro people who pull off a good application in an all-nighter or 2 days. We really spend good. Like you add a 0 at the end of it, it's 20 days for one application. That genuinely does justice to us and to an applicant. So for your journey question, we look at the 4-month checklist in a bit, but this is what it is for everybody who's been asking me. And for anybody who wants to ask any further questions, guys, feel free to raise your hand. Till then, we're tackling the second question from an applicant who sent it to us on email. How can an applicant thoroughly, this is for both for you, Samriddhi and Drupal, feel free to jump in. How can an applicant thoroughly research target schools, culture, programs, and faculty?
So best way, I would say, obviously you go through first of all, we go to the rankings that I do understand. Then we go to the post-MBA goals. That also is something. But for some students, it is discipline and some it is not. It comes through the journey. And then the school websites are really exhaustive. You have to spend time on that because you have to deep dive on that. There are so many tabs that open, so many information in that. That's like you get 35% of the information from there. That's very exhaustive and one should invest time in doing that. And secondly, after the website info comes the course that you made. You have to connect with students, alums and professors. That's very, very important. You cannot understand the school culture without having a conversation with them. Because MBA goals is one thing, location is one thing, but you fit in the community that you have to decide and you understand that while communicating with people around. So that this also requires time. So like you start connecting with them now, you get calls because they're also very busy over there. They have their schedules, they're not available every time. They are responsive. Then this thing has to start. That is what I will suggest.
Okay, so I'd like to chime in here. This is one of the other reasons why you might want to start early. Apart from connecting with them to understand the culture, they're going to be very busy as the deadlines approach and they might not be able to get on a call with you. Now, what I did to understand the schools better, I made an Excel sheet apart from my consultant's help. I was not even going to apply to Kellogg, and it was she who selected that, okay, you were going to be a very good culture fit. Now, I connected with students on LinkedIn. It is very important that you connect with admissions committee, especially for schools like Duke. They will know, and Tuck, they will know that you've connected with them. They will note down your names, right? And I did message professors on LinkedIn. For instance, I really like this professor called Ifosa Ikojima. He's a new faculty at Kellogg. And I messaged him that I'm really excited to be attending your class. He takes healthcare strategy. He's an entrepreneur himself. And then we did have a conversation. And I mentioned this during my Kellogg interview. And the interviewee, who was a second year student, was impressed that I had put in so much work to get to know the school. My Excel sheet was so exhaustive that I'd put in the climate conditions, the tuition, the professors that I like, what I don't like, what are the profiles and the qualities that they're looking for. And all of this is actually mentioned on their website. You just have to go ahead and read it. So that's what my school selection / knowing them was like.
Yeah.
What she mentioned is actually very correct. You have to be very specific with these like small questions, and this is how you come to know. If climate culture is climate, everything, small things are very important. The stay, the professors connect, how do they evaluate, how is the cases formed there? These questions you have to put up to them.
Absolutely. And that brings a quick anecdote or a story from a couple of months back to my mind. So this applicant, Pooja Mittal, we worked with, she just joined INSEAD with a 640 GMAT and a scholarship. Like that was one of the biggest wins that MBA and Beyond has had, because that's the lowest score that we could ever get admitted to INSEAD. So she was here, like we invited her one of these days because she lives in Netherlands. And so she came to my place and we were just having a chat. I was like, dude, how did you really like you? She was very persistent. While she, of course, worked heavily on her application, that's one bit of it. But she made sure that everyone in the admissions committee knew her. No matter how, like she was a part of all the, engagement activities that INSEAD was doing. She was reaching out left, right, center to almost everybody, making connections on LinkedIn. And of course, I don't know if we are not reaching out to people on LinkedIn, what are we doing? There's no point watching Instagram reels, guys. It's not going to get us where we want to get at. So I think let's spend more time on LinkedIn connecting with more people from the school that are coming to your mind. And I don't just go on like a 15-minute chat with them. People are very helpful. If they have time on the weekend, they're happy to go on a call, to be honest, especially from business schools. So try to do that instead. It really helps. What both of them said, this is what you need to do. And that's why you need to do now. You need to start now. And because application journey, I think in an applicant's mind is just writing essays, which it is absolutely not. It's a very small part of your application journey. It's a lot more brainstorming that happens around it. So yeah, I think we've got some questions. Saroj, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question to Samriddhi and Rupal.
Okay, thanks for the insight, Samriddhi and Rupal. So here again, it comes to the question of recommendations. So I have just one question in my mind. Like I have actually left my organization last year itself as a project coordinator, and then of course I was actually engaged completely in a project, and I was actually pursuing my master's in data science back then. So I was surely engaged with one of the project, and at that moment I had come in contact with one of the student mentors who actually is a working professional. But if in case, let's suppose I have no such recommendations except for my team lead, and I would like to take up the recommendation of my student mentor. So does that work that way, or is it only the professional contacts that we can actually take for the recommendations?
Can you, hi Saroj, can you help me understand if the student mentor is your mentor or are you mentoring?
Yeah, he's actually my mentor. He was completely engaged with me when I was actually working on the project solely. So he was just trying to give me with the ideas, help me out with the ideas and how to approach any specific problem or something like that. So, and he was actually taking insights, like whatever the progress I have been making with that project. So he was actually just taking the insights, and as well as he was just suggesting me how to follow up with the process and all these things. So it is a study based, but again, that project is completely like college project, we can say. It is completely a machine learning project. And he was completely guiding me end to end. So if I would like to take him as my recommender, so will it work, or I just need to take the professional contacts when I was actually working in a previous organization? So that's just I wanted to know.
Okay, so two things to consider here. First of all, your recommenders need not be entirely your direct supervisors. With that being said, it's not like you can put your mom as a recommender or a relative or somebody like that. Matlab, it has to be professionally related. But if you guys have worked together, you can always explain it in the end, right? There's an additional passage in all of the applications where you can put in the explanation that this is how you know them in this capacity. They might not be your direct supervisors, but yes, you work together. Secondly, with that being said, even when you're taking, this is for everyone, even when you're taking recommendations, make sure your recommenders kind of know you personally. Otherwise, it is going to be very, very hard for them to be writing you those glorious letters of recommendation. Now, this first manager of mine, because I did not hang out with him, right? And he does not know what my struggles are, how am I managing the work and all of that stuff. While he might write me accolades from my work, it does not go on to describe any of my personal qualities. So, yeah, these are the two things you might want to keep in mind. I hope that helped.
Yeah. So I'll just jump in to add a couple of things along with, of course, somebody said, I completely agree with that. So you need to first identify what anecdotes you're going to be sharing in your application. If majority of them are coming from somebody who you very closely worked with, and we advise that you do that because we want supporting evidence from that person. You want a supporting evidence for everything that you're saying. So when you're bringing in that supporting evidence, you should pick your recommender basis. That also helps you understand who your recommender should be. So in an ideal case, business schools will expect you. They don't always say that they're looking for only a professional recommender. For example, if people have family businesses, they cannot have a recommender as their, dad or mom, like Samriddhi said. So they have to really go out of the way above and beyond to look for clients as their recommenders or, vendors as their recommenders. Somebody else in that scenario that will suit their need. So you need to see like how you can and who can be the best fit. Because if you have a manager, if you have a direct reporting manager, and if you do not get even one recommendation from them, they might question that. Why did you not ask your manager to be giving that to you? Because they might be interested in knowing that, while you can always submit extra recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, Abhishek, please go ahead and mute yourself.
Thank you. Hi, Rupal, and hi, Samriddhi. I actually had a follow-up question to what we were just discussing. So, like you said, Samriddhi, that, we have to, give the recommenders like someone who knows us personally. So like for me, when I was, working in my previous organization, my direct reporting manager was not someone senior, right? But would it help if, someone senior would be recommending me or writing a letter of recommendation for me, or would it not make so much of a difference? Like, does their seniority or their designation play a part in the application process at all?
Okay, so this is what admissions committee members are going to be telling you, that it does not matter at all as long as it's a quality letter of recommendation. You haven't worked with the VC of the CEO of the company, for instance, and if he's writing you an LOR, I don't know what content is he going to be writing. Now, with that being said, I know the content of it matters the pulp, but I haven't actually had many senior people write my LORs. So when I was an intern doctor, I had a JR write my LOR, right? And it was mostly about me, how I was with people, how I was a doctor, how I was as a person, how I treated my colleagues and my patients and stuff like that. So yeah, I did not, this is what admissions committee is going to advise you. And this is what my personal experience has been. It's not written in stone, but no, it does not matter as long as it's a great LOR.
One thing, I would like to add. So, person with whom you have worked closely is actually the best fit for your recommendation, because that person knows you professionally, and when you have worked with them closely, they come to know you personally as well. So, if you have like their whatever designations are big or not, that doesn't matter. And another thing, what Paridhi said, if it is connecting what you have written in your application, that would be your best fit, because that's giving them a second proof. Because for me, this happened. In one of my essay, what I quote, my recommender wrote those exact wordings. Like she had worked and excelled and achieved those targets. So that was a bang on for me. So with whom you have worked, they will know you professionally and personally, and that's very important. That person should write your recommendation.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thanks.
All right, welcome. Ashish, you can unmute yourself. Feel free to ask your question.
I'm sorry, I was just struggling to find where was the raise button for the longest time. I was trying to understand this technology. I was just lost for a minute. Thank you for hosting the session. This has been quite helpful. So my question is directed towards one person, Doctor, who's right sitting there, because my profile aligns a lot with you. Right out of college, I started a venture which I couldn't scale up. Then I went and joined a very small startup. Thankfully, it scaled up quite well. We are a unicorn now, and I'm planning to do my MBA as well this year. So one question I've been struggling with, I mean, I think you must have come across that as well, that why MBA? I mean, you're now in the startup space. I want to do an entrepreneurship eventually as well. I want to start my own business. That's my dream, and that's like set in my brain as well. But why MBA? And to be honest, the story doesn't even change. MBA, consulting, entrepreneurship. I'm on the same path.
Yeah, so it was very straightforward for me. It took a lot of iterations, but it comes to one line that I want to pivot to management consulting in order to get more exposure and polish my problem solving skills so that I can translate it to my entrepreneurial venture. This has been a constant in like almost all of the interviews. Yeah, I did have to practice it, but this is how it ended up.
Yeah. And so actually just building up on that, a lot of failed entrepreneurs and also successful ones. I mean, they want to go do an MBA because of course they're all trying to find a cushion. They have this, this bug in them that they always want to end up doing entrepreneurship, because once you're bitten by that bug, there's no going back. You'll always want to keep going back to that no matter how much risk it takes. It's just to minimize that risk, you want to find that cushion. My question to you is, why do you want to go for an MBA if you are already heading a unicorn?
So it's more of I've never been structurally trained in business. And I mean, if you talk to certain people, I don't know corporate finance as much. I never had a structured learning. I didn't know what cash flow statements were, discounted rates were. So those things I think are still quite important when you're talking to someone who's like he wants to invest in your company and you have some knowledge of it. It doesn't mean you have to be a financial analyst to give those answers. Where does the cash come from? Where do you make the money? I think few questions are still like very ingrained in the basics. It's I think a business school would best teach. And when you want to when you already have set a platform, you can aim high as possible.
I think that's your answer. We'll of course need to polish it a little. I can go a little more specific, mostly what entrepreneurs also write in their application. So they try to, let's say if you've had failures in expansion or in scaling, you try to highlight the specific gaps in your own profile that led to that. Which right now, for example, you're talking about, it could be finance in your case. For example, if we don't understand that cash flow is bigger than revenue, then we are really faltering with respect to how do we understand business. And you want to really expand on that knowledge of understanding business, because of which your startup failed. That gives a very, plausible explanation to a business school that yes, the theoretical knowledge that you're going to capture or whatever you learn from the peers who are going to be entrepreneurs as well is going to back up, your startup initiatives in the future. So, yeah, I mean, most entrepreneurs go for the similar reason that you just quoted right now. But of course, they frame it in a very polished way.
Yeah, so my consultant actually did that. So for me, there was a failed start a venture, and it could not scale up actually to that level it should have been. So then she actually asked me to interview what were the shortfalls, what were the things that you think that were the reasons of your failure, and it could not scale up. And we did mention that, and then we connected that to our post-MBA goals as well. The long-term goals. So there are short-term goals and the long-term goals you have to mention over there. The short-term goals, then you have to connect your short-term goals with the long-term goals. So that is what we bridge the gap, that these are the shortfalls. Then I will be going for consulting, and with the knowledge of consulting and this financial knowledge and XYZ what I need, I'll be restarting my failed venture. So this is how, you connect the dots. This is how you have to build, basically. And these are the actual reasons why you want to do your MBA. And these are the actual reasons. You are not stating anything like just to state. Because when you interview yourself, you will yourself get those reasons out. Like very well, Paridhi said, like why? When you ask the why to yourself, you'll get the answers.
Makes sense.
Okay, I think Nishesh and Saroj are asking one question to people. So we'll pick this one. MBA in US versus MBA in Europe. Spain/UK/France, of course, anywhere in Europe versus Asia. Singapore and India. In India, he's talking about ISB. How do we shortlist different options? What factors should be considered? This is a very personal question, but I'm very curious to hear what Samriddhi and Rupal have to say to this. How do you pick schools geography-wise?
Okay, so I did not end up applying to European schools, although I initially intended to, because it's just a year, 1 year MBA, right? And as a person who's from a non-traditional background, I would not have been able to cope and finish all of that in a year. So that was one of the factors. Now, second thing in my head, I want to be like this global entrepreneur and a global citizen. And I think US as a place gives you more exposure to that. So for instance, Kellogg has the second highest recruitment to Singapore, and thereafter it's Dubai, right? So that was another factor. Now, why did I not apply to Indian school was I actually did want to step out and see the world.
Fair. Rupal?
So
What
for
was-
me, I was very strong-headed that it's being US and US also where. So for me, geography was actually sorted. I want to be in like big cities, near to big cities. So I selected college that way. So I didn't actually brainstorm much in that. So I'm not the right person to answer that.
So I feel this works on a lot of personal preferences, and I can talk about the array of preferences that applicants really look for. So one of the topmost, which I really value in candidates, choice of picking a certain geography is the work culture where you see yourself working. I know for most of us who are trying to get to a very credible business school, that may not play a very important role, but you really need to foresee yourself to be sustaining in a culture that you want to, spend at least 5 years after you graduate. So you potentially want to apply to a business school that is in the vicinity or in the geography, which is going to land you a job. Second, I'm going to definitely look at my goals because I need to understand if I'm a person who wants to apply for healthcare, potentially, whether irrespective of the geography, I may want to apply to the best schools of the world. So in Europe, Cambridge judges really pick. For example, somebody is going to Kellogg. There are some of the schools like Cornell, Tepper, which have been sending applicants, candidates to a lot of healthcare companies and pharma. And they've been talking big in the news about how they want to push more global business leaders to become, to be solving the problems in the pharma and healthcare industry after COVID. So some schools have become very vocal about it. So you may want to make a list of those schools which are very, aligned with what I want to do after an MBA. So irrespective of the geography, I will pick that. And if geography needs to come into picture, I may also want to also understand what is the visa situation, work visa situation, how many years can I stay back? Because some countries have now started to become more and more stringent. And I know we get 70% of our applicants come from India. We've been hearing horror stories about the whole H-1B situation. So you need to be very mindful. While, of course, hedge your bets, try to understand that if you're going for a regular MBA which does not offer you a STEM program, you do not get the 3-year OPT. You do not get an opportunity to stay back in the country for 3 years. You only go for 1 year. So do your research, understand, is your purpose staying back in a country? Then you need to understand visa situations. You need to understand some bit of geopolitics, geoeconomics that's going on across the globe, the job market of that particular industry where you want to land into. And if all of that aligns, then I think, and along with work culture, if you cannot sustain a certain work culture, which is very heavy, does not make sense. So let's say if I was somebody to go into a tech role and I'm aiming for Silicon Valley, I might just pick schools which are on the West Coast like Haas, Stanford, GSB. I'm going to mostly only apply to the schools because that's closer to my goals. And in 4 months, how many schools can you really apply to? Maximum 7. If you split it across, 15 to 17 days. So make sure you're applying in a geography where you want to really land yourself. Also, it's good sometimes to hedge your bets by applying across geographies. You don't know how the scenario might change in the next 1 year when you're going to start your business school. So that is my 2 cents. Any other questions? If you guys have, you can raise your... Yes, please, Saroj, you can unmute yourself on the same thing if you want to build up.
Okay. So I'm not sure if this is a bit irrelevant to this session or not, but I just wanted to ask specifically to Paridhi as well, including Paridhi as well. So let us suppose I am from completely a non-finance background and I am seeking to go into a specialization that is specifically into finance. whether it is a finance analyst or investment banker or anything like that. But my background is completely non-financial. So in that case, if I try to do some short-term course provided by the business schools in India, along with Niti Aayog and Government of India, and along with that, they have certain kind of projects which we can at least work on a short-term basis. So do those kind of courses or work experience, like the part-time works, add value to the essays when we're actually applying for schools abroad as well? So I just wanted to inquire about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off and then Rupal, Samriddhi, you can maybe add. So I can talk about one of the applicants who went to LBS with a 100% scholarship because her essays resonated, especially when you mentioned Niti Aayog. So she worked in Amazon in the tech capacity, but she eventually wanted to be a management consultant. She actually worked with us for 1.5 years. She was hell-bent that I want to put management consultant as a post-MBA goal, even though she did not have any amassed experience or examples to support. So she actually for 1.5 years did a lot of pro bono consulting projects on the side. And she framed her story around how she wants to take EdTech to next level to educate people in very remote areas. For that, she actually worked within a Niti Aayog's project where she was on the advisory committee as pro bono tech consultant. And this made up 70% of her application. So Saroj, whatever you're doing, or whether or not it's with a big organization, governmental organization, or NGO, as long as you are doing it which aligns with what you want to pitch as your post-MBA goal, it's going to add meat to your application. That's my 2 cents. Rupal and Samriddhi, your thoughts would be
Yeah,
valuable.
definitely. I think the approach that you are following is like very correct, because this shows like you are actually putting in efforts. And IB, I tell you, it's something you should get familiarized with before getting into that, because when you have to set jobs for IB, so these things will matter a lot, because there are people that are very strong-headed that have like IB as a post-MBA goal. And when you don't have that experience, you might face challenges over there, or you might face, that skill set that you might face the lack of skill set. So these things, what you will be doing actually will build you, make you more prepared for that. And it will show the school that you are making efforts and how serious you are about it. So that's like the perfect approach to follow for that.
Yes, because the thing is that many of the financial background people will be actually applying who might have extensive knowledge and work experience with these venture capitals and private equity funds and all these things. So coming from a non-financial background, it will definitely put me way behind them when applying for any top-based school. So just wanted to understand, like with these small projects, whichever government of India is actually providing or like giving a chance to work on, so will those even have an impact when we are actually applying to the schools?
They do. And I have seen that when you associate with government projects, they do have a special like 1x factor. So that also counts for it. And for me also, I don't have a financial background, but that was a specific question in my interview, that how confident are you with your quants and subjects in quants. So since I am in the financial industry, I'm exposed to those terms. I know those terms. I studied that, but practically I don't have that experience. But I hear it around me. So that was the way I could convince her that I mentioned a subject specifically. So this is like you have to deep dive into subjects when you are writing your application. That gives an edge to it. So I mentioned that in X subject, I am like 80% confident. In those subjects, I need to brush up. I am like 40% confident. So you can, when you give those data points to a person, it shows that you have done your research and you are building yourself for that level. So this kind of inputs are very essential.
The data is the figures that actually matter.
So I have so it might not just apply to investment banking, but to everybody out there. You do not go around taking jobs randomly, right? It's either the field you want to work in, or it is going to lead to something else. And business schools will notice it. And it's not going to be like, okay, I want to, especially for if I would have written investment banking or private equity, they would have said that then why the hell are you even, darting around with entrepreneurship or health tech and stuff like that. So just as a rule of thumb, make sure whatever work experience that you put in has some correlation to where you want to be or where you are.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
All right.
that's why they connected our post MBA goals.
Yeah. Sorry, we've got 7 minutes. I'm just conscious of time and a bunch of questions. So we'll try to capture as many as possible. So Nihal's checking in, guys, for Samriddhi and Rupal. How did you select your ambitious, realistic, and safe schools? If you've got any 2 cents to share, like how did you bucket them?
Okay, so I think my consultant was a huge help in this. Like I mentioned, she was the one who suggested that I should go to Kellogg. And it was only after she suggested I actually started looking into that. Do you know Kellogg actually has a healthcare entrepreneurship track that none of the other schools offer? And my safe schools, I did get waitlisted from my safe schools, and I was like, okay, great, it's a safe school. Let's not stress a lot about it. But for me, a huge part, after she shortlisted it, a huge part was what the ranking was, because I'm going to be making a huge investment into wherever I go, and I want a great ROI. And second part was culture. If I do not fit in with the culture, there is no way in the world that I'm going to be going there. I've suffered enough in medicine, and let's just deviate. So that's one of the reasons I did not end up applying to Wharton. I did not like my conversations. So
I really like how you said that, to be honest, Samriddhi, because I feel what we don't understand as applicants, that it's a two-way street. It's not that they have to like you. You also have to like them. And that's why you need to talk to them and make sure that they are wanting to have you more than you're wanting to. You're that important to them. You are really a stat in their career statistics, dude. So you need to make sure that they're really liking you. So I really like the point that you make, Samriddhi. Like you can really go a verse about, how a school's admissions committee is talking to you, how they're really looking at you as your profile. Sometimes they might just say that, oh, you're just a 640. Some of our applicants were told you shouldn't even be applying. Why would you even consider applying? While, of course, if some school shows even if slightest of interest in your profile, they become one of your schools of choice. That's a good one. Blooper, do you want to add to that, Neha's question?
So I think we summed up, we covered everything. So yeah,
Next one. Somebody's checked. Arun wants to know what are the chances of getting admitted in round 2 as compared to round 1. Both of your thoughts will be valuable here. Maybe you can talk about the rounds that you both applied in.
So I was very sure that I wanted to apply to most of the schools in round 1. That's what I did. Bunch of things. So I did apply by myself in a year previously during round 2. I did get into Rotman, but the scholarships are easier in round 1. There are less number of applicants. Round 2 is actually the heaviest admissions that they will get. Although they say that there's no difference in the percentage of accepted candidates. That's one thing. Thirdly, as an international, your visa situation has to be figured out, right? Even as round one admits, a lot of us do not have visa appointments as of now. Now, there's another thing. Let us say you get waitlisted during your round 1. You still have time to work for it in your round 2. So I was very, very headstrong that this is what I want to do. And that's one of the reasons I started very early on. So, yeah.
All right. So I hope that answered, and I would say the same. If you're targeting scholarships, we need to go as early as possible. And I'm not sure if you're aware that India does open rolling admissions this year. So they are going to be announcing the application open day, I think on July, maybe 5th or 7th July. That's what they do every year. And the deadline is going to be September. But what do we mean by rolling admissions? The earlier you apply, early side of the application window, the better are your chances, because your application is going to be evaluated as they receive it. So if you're targeting any of the schools, first try to find out, do they have regular admission deadline or they have rolling admissions deadline? If you already have the score, I think you're in a good window to prepare your application in the next 2 months, because that's when the applications will open up, and hit the submit button as soon as they open up. The essays are not going to change. Essay remain the same for most of the schools throughout, like year on year. So you do not have to worry about that. Oh, what if I've written my essay answers and the question changes? Some questions never changed in more than a decade. So you can already prepare your application material. All right, we've got next question. So some people have sent me direct messages. Sorry guys, I am choosing the ones in the group first. While I'm happy to share my calendar link, we can have a chat on the weekend. So the next one is, what are some of the questions we might want to ask alumni, faculty, adcoms, etc.? So maybe Samriddhi, Rupal, if you can help people list down some questions to understand the school and the culture better.
Okay, so with the admissions committee, I took a very specific approach. I'd go out and find out very, very specific questions just to make sure that they know that I have searched about the school and that I am extremely interested, right? For instance, there is a Tuck for Go project in first year, and this one project I really liked, wherein they flew kids to Nepal and they worked for a pro bono healthcare, something like that. And they did recognize me later on because I asked that if I'd be able to choose my projects on my own, because I would love to work on something like that. So for admissions committee, your whole goal should be to make sure that they know that you searched the school thoroughly and that you're interested enough. While the chats with students are fairly casual, I can go from things like, okay, what do you enjoy the most? And what's your usual day like? If you could, if you could go back and choose other schools, would you do that? And I've gotten very colorful answers for that also. So keep it formal with the admissions committee, partially formal with the alums, but you can get like straight up info from the current students.
Yeah. I know we're coming to the end of the session. What I'm going to do, and I would like to, of course, answer your questions later. I'll drop in my calendar link here soon after the session when we're wrapping up. You feel free to book your 15 minutes call with me. I'm happy to have a one-on-one with all of you. Sundays, half day, I'm still talking to some of the applicants. Saturdays is completely free for me right now, so you can book your slots. Now, this is what an application plan should look like if you're already starting to work on your application right now for round 1. This is not for round 2, guys. If you're still thinking round 2, then you can really start later. You should really be working on content gathering. This is what we would recommend as soon as you start in May, which is when you start thinking about your YMBA, your strengths, your weaknesses, whatever you need to do, to polish your application, come up with your branding. Your branding is your one-pager document that is used as your pitch by your consultants and yourself to refer to whenever you're preparing for your interview or you're preparing for your essays. So once your content gathering and branding is done, it should be done by the end of May. It will take that amount of time. You should be ready with if you don't have your scores now, we push you to at least have your mock scores, stable mock scores that you're going to have. So we know okay, how do we benchmark your schools with your story and with your scores? In June, we should be ready with your schools. Once we're ready with your schools, then I think by mid-June to mid-July, you should be preparing your essays. By end of July, you should be ready with your essays. In August, you should only be spending time on your letters of recommendation and your resume. And if there is any time left, then you can, of course, go back and forth and polish your essays a little more before you submit. And you should be ready to submit by the last week of August or first week of September. So this is how we recommend that you should be tackling with or without MBA and beyond. However you're working, if you're working by yourself, then you should be working on your application document. All right. So I think it was a great session. Thanks for a very insightful session, Samriddhi and Rupal. It was lovely chatting with both of you and hosting the session with both of you. Thank you everyone for joining.